When you open RealFlow for the very first time, you will get a message that your copy is currently unlicensed, and the software's internal license manager opens. Please note that this tool can only manage the standard GUI license. Other types, for example RealFlow Notes or the render kit, cannot be added here. The license has been sent to you via email, and it can be copied from there. We recommend storing a copy of this license in a safe place. Now, return to the License Manager, click on New License, and paste the clipboard's content to the empty field. If the license is valid, RealFlow starts and you see the Project Management window. This panel can be seen as a control center for creating or opening projects. A project always consists of two elements: its name and the location where the associated files are stored. The path to the project's folder can be changed, and you do not have to use the default directory, suggested by RealFlow. We will show you how to do this a little later. If you do not want to save a project under RealFlow's default path, you can choose any folder by clicking on this button. Of course, network and external volumes are supported as well. The Recent Projects panel contains a list with the previously loaded simulations. After a few minutes, you will see a warning telling you that a project name must exist. As mentioned, it is just a warning, and you can close the project management window and proceed. But you should always apply a project name. From the time you type in a project name, the full path field becomes active. There, you can see the complete path to the project file, wearing a FLW extension. Now, click on Create a new project. The project management window is closed, and RealFlow creates a new directory on your hard disk with all necessary folders and files. Now you have access to RealFlow's graphical user interface, also called GUI. Before we start to explain RealFlow's windows and icons, we want to point you to the Software's Preferences panel. There, you can customize RealFlow's fundamental functions, and we will be returning to this window several times during this lesson. The adjustments under Preferences are valid for every RealFlow project, and they are also called global settings. For now, we'll change the location where the projects are stored by default, together with some other basic parameters. Open the Preferences window from the File menu. On the left, there is a tree with themed branches. Each branch opens a panel with specific settings, and the first one is called General. Scenes folders specifies a default location for all projects, and you can either type in a path manually or choose one with a file browser. Another very important option can be found under Axis Setup. The drop-down menu allows you to adopt RealFlow to the axis system of your 3D application. This is necessary because some programs use the Y-axis as the height axis, while others use the Z-axis. If the setup is not correct, imported objects are flipped by 90 degrees. Then there is a scale area. These settings can be left untouched because it is possible to change scales at any time for each project individually. Under Backup, you can manage the backups of the currently open scene. RealFlow provides two formats. FLW is the already mentioned standard file format. These files can not only contain scene description data, but also simulation data, for example particles. The XML format also saves scene description data, parameters, and even animation curves in an editable text file. XML files are very small and perfectly suited for data exchange. Finally, you can define how many backup files you want to create and the interval. Confirm the settings with OK and return to the GUI. RealFlow's user interface consists of several parts. The most striking panel is a viewport with its grid. It provides a visual representation of the environment and its elements. Here, you can also monitor the progress of the simulation and how the scene's elements interact. When you take a look at the viewport's title bar, you see a few small icons, and you can find these at the other windows too. The first icon provides a list with different GUI elements to convert the current window into another type. This comes in very handy when you need a certain element only temporarily, for example a scripting window or the movie player. The second icon only affects the viewport, and you know its mode of operation from your 3D program. Just choose a layout from the context menu to split the viewport. If you want to get rid of these additional viewports, you can either close each window individually or return to RealFlow's default layout. If you want to collapse or expand a window, double-click on the title bar. Alternatively, it is also possible to use the appropriate icon. RealFlow's windows can also be detached from the main layout and turned into floating windows. All windows and panels can be repositioned with drag-and-drop actions. A semi-transparent frame indicates where the window will be placed when it is dropped. Other GUI elements are available from the Layout menu. The elements listed here contain scripting editors, preview tools, and other helpers to support your work with RealFlow. If you want to learn more about their wealth of features, please visit our online technical documentation. The online manual provides the latest information and is constantly updated. Its clear structure and flat navigation helps you to find what you need quickly. Detailed descriptions of RealFlow GUI elements can be found under the same named topic. It contains not only a description of an element's basic functionality, but also submenus and right-click menus. To open a GUI element, you only have to select it from the menu. Now, grab the title bar, drag it to the desired position, and drop it to attach the panel. The layout can be fully customized, and even multi-screen arrangements are supported. The icon bar is another important element to accelerate your workflow because it provides access to the most used tools, functions, and simulation nodes. A closer look reveals that the icons are grouped. They are, for example, the nodes bar, the visibility and simulation bars, or the Maxwell bar. All these elements can be rearranged easily, and it is also possible to add new rows or attach them vertically. At the moment, the layout is only temporary, and with the next start of RealFlow, all these changes will be lost. Therefore, the layout can be saved. Go to the Layout menu, choose Save Layout, and save the current state. RealFlow's layout files should be added to the standard folder, because then they will appear in the drop-down menu under Apply Layout. Here, you will find the layouts you have created for different purposes. To apply one, just choose it from the list. If you want to define an arrangement, such as RealFlow Startup Layout, then open the Preferences window again and click on Layout. Under Default Layout, you can choose one of the previously stored files. RealFlow offers several ways to add objects and scene elements to a project. The most common way is to use a nodes bar. Here you have direct access to domains, emitters, daemons, objects, or real-wave surfaces. The different node types are grouped, and each element has its own icon to make it distinguishable. In order to add a new node, you only have to select it from the list. If you do not want to go to the icon bar each time you are adding a new element, then you can also use a right-click menu in the Viewport and Nodes windows instead. The Relationship Editor also provides a method of adding new nodes. Click on the editor's canvas to set the focus and press the Tab key. Now you can choose the desired node. If you prefer to work with RealFlow's main menu, please go to the Edit entry. Finally, it is also possible to import polygon objects from external sources, for example your 3D application. RealFlow supports a wide variety of third-party file formats. The native format for data exchange is called SD and supported by the connectivity plugins. Objects can be loaded from the import menu. There is also an XML option. We already introduced this format when we were talking about backup files. Once you have added a new node, it appears in the Viewport, the Nodes window, and the Relationship Editor simultaneously. When the node is selected, it is highlighted, and you have access to its settings in the Node Params panel. The viewport gives you a visual representation of the scene, and you can choose from various perspectives and shading modes. To change the current perspective, use the keys 1 to 4. If the scene contains a camera, you can look through it with a 5 key. The frames around the viewport represent the camera's field of view. This feature can be disabled with the functions of the View menu. This menu also provides a function to hide the viewport's grid and the different shading modes. These shading modes and perspective modes are also accessible from the viewport's right-click menu. It is also possible to change the shading mode for each object individually with the icons of the visibility bar. There are functions to hide an object in the viewport, and they work with multiple object selections as well. To create a multi-selection, shift-click on the objects, or draw a rectangle around them. If an object is difficult to access, because it is hidden behind other nodes, then it can be selected with multiple clicks on a visible node. Another possibility is to choose from the Nodes window or the Relationship Editor. Of course, it is also possible to alter the current point of view, zoom in or out, and pan the scene. To change the viewport, press and hold the Alt key. Then, left-click and drag the mouse to rotate the viewport. With a right-click, you can zoom in or out, and the middle button is used to pan. If your mouse has a middle wheel, then you can zoom in and out easily. In the latter case, you do not have to press the Alt key. Sometimes it happens that the current viewport size is not large enough, and it would be great to have a one-click method to expand the viewport. With the Clean Layout function from the Layout menu, you can maximize a viewport. In order to switch back to the standard configuration, it is necessary to apply the default layout again. Another option is to disable the viewport with the Alt-D shortcut. When the viewport is disabled, you will observe a significant boost in terms of simulation speed. The reason is simply that RealFlow does not have to spend CPU time updating the viewport. But let's go back to the nodes in the viewport. Basic object transformations are performed with the Move, Rotate, and Scale tools. These tools are also represented by the M, E, and R keys. When one of the transformation tools is active, you see an appropriate set of handles, one for each axis. The arrangement of these handles corresponds with a small axis icon and the axis setup under Preferences. If the scene contains imported objects from an SD file, then they are locked to preserve the current transformations, but it is often necessary to change something. Select the object and click on the SD to Curve button. Nodes with animation data will lose this information once you have unlocked them, but this state can be restored with another click on an object's SD to Curve button. The viewport's layout is not static, and you can customize it in many ways with the Display Preferences. When you take a look at the viewport's left side, you will see a list with information about every node of the scene. Sometimes this list takes too much space from the viewport, or covers important parts of the simulation. Under Display Info, you are able to change the appearance of this list. A very good option is Selected Nodes. If you do not want any information at all, choose None. RealFlow's grid is important to evaluate an object's dimensions and its proportions in conjunction with other nodes. By default, the size of a square is 1 meter by 1 meter, but you can change this value according to your needs. The colors specify the viewport's background gradient and the grid's color. If you do not want to show a gradient, simply use the same RGB definition for the background color fields. If you prefer a background image instead of a color, close the Preferences tab and open the View menu. With Load Screen Texture, you can load any image and apply it to the viewport. Please bear in mind that this image cannot be saved with a layout, and you have to load it with every start of RealFlow. On the first look, the Nodes panel seems to be nothing more than a list with all available nodes, but it has some very interesting features to accelerate your workflow. These functions are accessible from right-click menus. A click on an empty area of the panel opens a menu with filters, and you can decide which node types you want to show or hide from the Nodes panel. You also have quick access to all of RealFlow's nodes with the Add menu. Another right-click menu is available for each object, and this one deserves a closer look. The Rename function makes a node's name editable, and you can enter a new name. Please be careful here. Avoid special characters and use unique names. Open Curves lists every animated attribute in RealFlow's curve editor. There, you can work on animation curves and expressions. In order to group objects, RealFlow provides several methods. The first one is to add a group node and throw the desired objects into this container. Another method is to create a node selection and use the group command from the right-click menu. The same applies for nodes in the relationship editor. If you want to remove nodes from a group, select them and choose Ungroup. Please note that nested groups are supported as well. A powerful yet underestimated function is Replace. The interesting thing is that you can replace any already existing node by an external object, and all of the source object's attributes and animation keys are kept, including the original name. It makes no difference whether the new object is greater or smaller or has a completely different geometry. Finally, you can change an object's basic simulation and visibility properties with a single click. These commands also work with multi-selections. RealFlow's relationship editor is a powerful tool to manage the interactions between the scene's elements. Since it has a wide range of functions and features, it is discussed in a separate tutorial. In any case, we want to give you a brief introduction here to get you off to a good start. Each scene element is represented by an icon. When you add the first object, RealFlow creates a node symbol and a so-called hub. A hub can be seen as a global connector. When objects are linked via a hub, they can interact with each other. If you do not want this global connection to be applied by default, please open the Edit menu and deactivate the Add to Default Hub option. Now, all nodes are created without links to other elements, and you have to draw the connections manually. Press the Ctrl key and draw a line from node A to node B to establish a link. This process has to be repeated until all nodes are connected. The interesting thing is that it is also possible to create exclusive links between certain nodes. It is, for example, possible to create several gravity daemons and let them act selectively on different emitters. Relationship Editor and Nodes panels are equitable. This means that all changes inside the Nodes panel affect the editor, and vice versa. Many other options, for example visibility or shading modes, are also displayed in the viewport. The editor's connections can be removed as well. Select them and press the Delete or Backspace key. Groups are also supported, and their content is displayed with a double click. You can also add an arbitrary number of hubs to create separate groups of interaction. Simulation is started with the Simulate button. When you click on the small triangle, you open a context menu with additional simulation options. These functions are explained in a separate tutorial. With Reset, you can go back to the specified start frame and clean the scene. It is now ready for a new simulation. Timecode, frame number, and elapsed simulation time are displayed in the viewport. RealFlow's timeline shows all necessary information about the simulation's progress. Simulated frames are displayed in orange, and the timeline slider indicates the current frame. The number feeds to the left and right of the timeline are used to specify a simulation start and end frames. If you want to extend or shorten a simulation, just enter a new value. The other field determines the last playback frame. Together with the first value, you can easily define a playback range. When you click on the Update Timeline Cache button, RealFlow loads all available existing simulation data. This is very interesting if you accidentally hit Reset, because the simulation data is not lost, and you can reload it with this button. Please bear in mind that this function does not create a backup. Once you resimulate, the previous data will be overwritten and cannot be restored, unless you save them in another place. The other button lets you find the last simulated frame easily. When you click on it, RealFlow jumps to the end of the orange progress bar. The Go to Frame field allows you to head for a particular frame. Near the timeline, there are also a few buttons. The most interesting one is certainly Scale Options, because here you will find parameters to adjust RealFlow scene scale for the currently open project. So far, you have learned many things about RealFlow's user interface and the ways of configuring the software. But what if you need some help, have to consult a manual, or look up a certain function? Then the Help menu is a place to go. There you can find a large collection of pre-built demo scenes for every purpose, links to online resources, and an internal technical reference under Contents. If you do not want to flip through dozens of pages to find a parameter description, then you should take a look at the F1 help. Every parameter under Node Params has an individual help text that can be displayed with the F1 key. Simply click on the parameter to highlight it and press F1. A more common explanation of the appropriate tab can be shown with a right click on the headline.